Guys, welcome back to the Pulling Pearls podcast. Today on episode 90, we're talking about what happens if you get hit by a bus. We've talked about wills before, but guys, this is something I'm really passionate about, so let's untangle it. Welcome to the Pulling Curls podcast. I'm Hillary, your curly-headed host on the podcast where we untangle everything from pregnancy, parenting, and home routines. I want you to know that there are no right answers for every family, and I find that simplifying my priorities is almost always the answer. It's tangled, just like my hair. Okay, guys, before we get started, leave me a review. I mean, you don't want to hit the pearly gates without having reviewed this great podcast, do you? Thanks. Okay, guys, today's guest is the co-founder and co-CEO of Everplans, which is a site where you can put all of your information, should you not be available, securely online. It looks really cool. I just went over and checked it out. She's also one of the authors of In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, How to Organize Your Life for Now for When You're Not Around Later. Guys, I think it's really important. I want to introduce today's show guest, Abby Schneiderman. Are you overwhelmed by all there is to do around your house? As a new mom, I felt overwhelmed at every turn. Fortunately, I turned to systems to make a change. Whether it's mornings, dinner time, or even just to climb out of a pile of kids' clothes, my course Family Routines can save you. I hold your hand as we smooth out these rough patches, making every day easier so we can more easily handle when your preschooler tells you they can use their urine like a lightsaber. Parenting is always going to be a wild ride. Routines are just your seatbelt, and they can support you. Use coupon code UNTANGLED to save 15% at checkout. Link in the show notes. Hey, Abby, welcome to the Pulling Curls podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, such a great day because I love to talk about death.
Me too.
But I love that you guys say that you rebrand estate planning to be less boring and more relevant to daily life, because I think that's really important. I think most of us just try and ignore it.
I literally just got done writing an email to somebody saying that, this doesn't have to be a morbid topic. We want people to think about this no differently than when they're buying a car seat for a new baby. When you're buying a car seat, you're not thinking about death and dying and car accidents. You're just thinking about being a responsible parent. And we want people to have the same mentality when they're thinking about doing this type of planning and organization. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be crazy. It's just being responsible.
Oh, I love that. You're right, because I'm not thinking about the accident when I buy the car seat.
Right. And
I mean, mostly I'm buying it for looks.
And the cup holder, right?
Yeah.
the cup holder was what got me. But I think that the whole mission that we are on and that we've been on for 10 years now was to physically change the language of this topic and to make it more modern, more human, more relatable, more approachable, because the fact is that up until, now, there haven't really been any modern, sophisticated resources dealing with this topic. And that's why one of the big reasons why people don't want to approach it. Everything's been a really scary funeral home website talking about, we don't want to be that. We're tech people. We're not deaf people. And frankly, I'm just as afraid about dying as anybody else.
Yeah. But maybe even probably less. Because I think
more.
Once I got a will, I was less, and like the whole trust and everything, because we have kids that are entering adulthood. I think I was less afraid of dying just because I knew that at least that part could be okay for them, even though they would be completely lost without me.
I think that's a good point. Maybe you're not less afraid of dying, but you can sleep better at night, right? Once you get some of this stuff organized and documented and shared, you can sleep better at night knowing that if something were to happen to you, if you get hit by a bus, your family won't be left in the lurch. And I've personally been that family member in the lurch when something, I don't know if you know this, but about 8 years ago, my brother was on his way to lunch while on vacation with his family. He was 51 years old when he was killed by a impaired driver driving down the wrong side of the road at 12 p.m. and broad daylight. And it was an absolute disaster for our family. Luckily, my brother had made some financial arrangements, but he didn't have a will. We had no idea how to access his accounts. We had no idea what accounts he had. And my family was left in this nightmare of a situation of having to track things down, figure out what he would have wanted in a really short amount of time. It's complicated, it's stressful, it's expensive, and we're, by the way, like probably making all of the wrong decisions about what he would have wanted. And so ever since, we've been on this mission at helping people think through all of what I call the nooks and crannies of your life that oftentimes get are just disorganized, but become huge problems for family members when they're left.
Yeah. I mean, I think the last thing any of us want to do is to shoulder our families with a great deal of burden upon our demise, besides the agonizing grief my husband will feel.
Right.
But we don't want them to have to work through this. Yeah.
And the burden is an exponentially difficult burden because you're taking on a burden when you're in a fog of grief and you're not thinking clearly and you're sad and you're exhausted and all you want to do is, stay in your bed. And now you have to make all sorts of decisions that you never wanted to make in the first place and you don't even know how to make. And so it's just a huge gift to give to your family, to think these things through, talk about these things with your family, or don't talk about them, but leave them behind somewhere safe. And that's what our service does. Everplans has a planning platform that allows you to put all of this information online securely and share it properly with the people you love so that if something does happen to you, they can get access.
Okay, I love this. So today I want to give, let's talk like 3 to 5 things the most important things that busy moms should be starting like today. Do it today, ladies.
Do it today. That's true. So today, what you should do is think about what are the things that are only in your head or that only you know about that you've done, that if, God forbid, something were to happen to you, your family it would turn into a total disaster. And so the things that we think people should do immediately, number one, critical passwords that you have, because these are the keys to the rest of your kingdom. And we explain in the book ways to keep them organized and safely shared with the people who need them. Next would be baseline information about the critical financial accounts and insurance policies if you have any, because that way your family will at least know where to start. Do you have a checking account at Citibank, but a savings account at Schwab, or wherever you do your business? Make sure that your family knows where you keep those important accounts. Have you gotten a life insurance policy? Make sure your family knows that you did that. We hear stories all the time about people who did planning. They got a policy in place, and then they never told their wife about it. And it turns into a disaster. And then lastly, your important contacts, a doctor, a lawyer, somebody at your employer, a neighbor. Make sure that you just think about who are those important people in your life that if something were to happen to you, that your family would know who to contact. And so you could just get started with that. If you just do that, and that's not complicated, right? That's just figuring out the planning that you've already done, and make sure that once you figure out what you already have, you document those things. We teach you how to do all this, by the way. You document these things, and then you make sure that that somebody in your life, at least one person in your life, knows where all of that is.
Yeah. And I have to say that a lot of that was the overwhelming part of setting up our trust, mostly because I've had several 401ks. So I had to go through all that and find the accounts and, all the contact information.
I think people think that they have to get, that this has to be super complicated. It has to be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. All of the things that I just said, you actually need in your everyday life now. Right? Even if you go on vacation and something happens and you have a babysitter staying with the kids, like that information is important and will come in handy. And it will also be just so, again, if something were to happen to you, just a huge, huge, valuable gift that you're leaving to your family. After you do that baseline, stuff, then you can start getting into the more legal aspects of traditional estate planning. You can get a will in place. You should be thinking about getting a power of attorney. You should be doing healthcare directives. You should be thinking about if there's any types, of insurance that you need to get. We help you assemble those what we call bigger pieces. And also we get you to start thinking about digital estate planning. What digital accounts do you have? What digital services do you use? What digital devices do you have that could end up becoming big problems for your family if they don't know how to access them? And then lastly is we help people think through what we call the finishing touches, how to personalize it all. And I'm happy to tell you more about that too.
Yeah. I mean, so I think a lot of us think we have to go to a lawyer. And if you, for a long time, we just didn't have the money for that. You have little kids, you're just, going paycheck to paycheck. And it sounds like those first the first things, we really don't need a lawyer. We just need probably a Google Doc. And especially if you're poor, you probably don't have a lot. So,
or Everplans. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. You could do a lot of this. I mean, you don't have to use a lawyer. If you have a more complicated situation, then definitely consult with an attorney, certainly your healthcare providers, if there are doctors, if you have certain medical conditions that you want to make sure you're documenting properly. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a lot of money for this to be important. Even if you have kids, you need to make sure that you're naming a guardian in the will as to who would take care of them if something were to happen to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, and digital estate planning is a big component of what we talk about too, which is typically not what people think of when they're thinking of traditional estate planning. But today, the average person has over 130 online accounts. And
yeah,
right. I mean, if you think about how we access those, you need a username and password, and 65% of people say that they keep those passwords in their head.
Those people are better than me. We'll just start with that. So I use LastPass. What do you guys recommend?
I use LastPass, and I also use Dashlane.
Okay.
And so I use one for work and one for personal use. And I literally couldn't live life without a password manager.
I mean, you could, but you would have the same password everywhere, which is how I lived a lot of my life for a long time.
Exactly. I mean, you really need to think about password management, and then hopefully you use a password manager so that, for all the reasons that you just discussed, but then you should think about storing that master password somewhere safely and make sure that somebody in your life knows how to get into the master password. Because otherwise, I mean, I tell my husband this all the time. If something were to happen to him, I need to know how to get into his phone. I need to know how to get into his computer. I need to make sure I know the Wi-Fi password to our apartment. And I need to know how to get access to, in our case, our car. It's particular to us, but we live in New York City, and I take the subway to work, or I did before COVID. And he drives to New Jersey where his office is. And if there was something happened in the city and I need to get out and something happened to him and I need to get to him, and I wouldn't have access to the car. And that's just a little thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just a little thing, but we're trying, the book is trying to help you think through all of those, little things that can end up becoming huge problems for your family. I recently spoke with a widow who recently lost her husband, and she said, you know what? We had done everything. He had organized everything. He had a will. We had all of it. But now I don't know how to change the light bulbs in our house. We use these special fancy light bulbs, and I have no idea what light bulbs he used, and I have no idea where to find them. And and she was like, this is the one thing that's driving me crazy right now. Like, why did you not tell me what those light bulbs were before you died? And so we hear this, everybody has a different light bulb in their life. And so think about what's your light bulb. And we help you think about what is that one thing that can become a huge problem for your family, and make sure that you start thinking about it.
I love that. And I love that you can just make it part of your everyday life, right? Like, as you see your husband doing the job that only he does, you can think, hey, what would I ever need if I had to do that? Because even with COVID, we tried to record extra podcasts because we just didn't know, what if I'm down for 2 weeks and not able to do anything, or not coherent enough to tell you where to buy a light bulb.
Right. I mean, you just never know. And COVID's another really good example. First of all, prior to COVID, during COVID, the whole world has been sort of hit by a bus in the form of this pandemic. But prior to COVID, I think people would have, thought about everything here as being nice to have. I think now more people realize this is not a nice to have. This is a need to have. We never know when we're going to need important information at our fingertips. And my family experienced something terrible during COVID right in March when everything was going down. My aunt and uncle in Texas were among the first people in their county. I think my uncle was the first person in his whole county in Texas to be diagnosed with COVID. And they had the whole horror story situation. He went into a coma. He was, put on a ventilator. Luckily, thank goodness he survived. But at the time when this was all going on and this was so scary and so crazy and it was March, so we didn't know anything and nobody knew anything. Their adult kids didn't even know, who don't live near them in their same town, didn't even know how to contact their neighbor. They didn't know who their neighbors were. Their mom and dad had just moved to a new community and they had no idea who their neighbors were. How can we get in touch with mom and dad? And they didn't know who their primary care physician was. And so those are just two little things, right? If you don't live near your kids, think about, okay, if something happened to us, how would my kids get in touch with us? Or who should they call? And so those are the types of things we're trying to get people to think about.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, guys, so get started. So you think passwords is probably the number one if they are picking?
Passwords is the number one.
Picking their one thing today. And I use LastPass. I had a lot of security concerns before I did it, but I've talked with a lot of security people and they say it is okay. It's your best bet.
And what we say about that is that you should only do what you feel comfortable doing online. And everybody has a varying degree of what they feel comfortable with. I do everything online. But even if you just leave your family with breadcrumbs as to where to look. So if you don't feel comfortable, if you use a service like Everplans where you're documenting all of this information for your family, and if you don't feel comfortable putting in, for example, your entire bank account information, just put where you do your banking so that in the event that something happens, your family at least knows where to go look.
Yeah.
But that alone will save, if not hours, days of your family hunting things down. And so you don't have to put everything into online services, but just put a few key things or help your family know where to start searching.
Yeah. Or even just like the last 4 of your account.
Or the last 4. Exactly. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
I love that because I think a lot of people are worried, Everplans gets hacked, then everything goes down for them. But yeah. All right. Great information. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, do it. Get in there and do it. Even if you've only got toddlers, get in there and do it.
Do it.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, guys, so I just popped over to Everplans. It looks like it's at $75 a year, but it looks very secure. If you're like me and you had like security concerns about, just having that in a binder in your home or who knows the heck what, or I always worry that like my house will have an issue, flood, fire, who knows? And then I've lost my will and I've lost my trust and yeah. So check that one out. Just get started. LastPass was surprisingly easy to set up. I know the idea of having to transfer all your passwords to a password manager makes you want to crawl in a hole and die, but it really was not that hard. So just like she said, that's your first step. And then let's just keep going. I'm definitely going to check out her book in case you get hit by a bus. I think we all need to do it, you guys. If you're pregnant, if you're single, if you're got older kids, if you're a grandpa, grandma, if you're my dad. That's right. If you're my dad, do it. Just do it. I'm going to go do it. We can all be better than what we are right now. I loved how she said, we're not thinking about the morbid points of a car seat. Try and just shove all that out of your mind so that it's not part of the factor. I love the idea of we're just doing this because we're responsible people. And I love being a responsible person. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope we helped smooth out a few of the snarls in your life. We drop an episode every Monday, and we always appreciate it when you guys share and review. Until next time, we hope you have a tangle-free day.